Next P is promotion, communication, advertising, sales promotions, etc. Promotion as we know it today will become totally obsolete. Digital age will have more impact on promotion than the industrial age had it, which was print-based technology primarily for media, print media. And of course, all of this is happening primarily because of the spectacular growth of social media. I still cannot conceive that in less than 7 or 8 years, after the start of the new millennium, 2000, Facebook has 1 to 1.5 billion active users. Google Plus has 750 million users. These numbers are ungodly, and I'm told that the total number of active users or subscribers on social media just exceeded 4 billion people. This is unthinkable, very interestingly. So social media becomes the platform, not television, not radio, not print, and social media is a huge scale-oriented, and the speed is enormous. I mean, today I can have a virally distributed news instantly all over the world. Therefore, the traditional location-based pricing for media is irrelevant now. It changes dramatically. So as I said, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn are dramatically transforming the promotion function in all marketing activities. Second one is mobile advertising, advertising on mobile phones. I think it's really becoming a big new platform. And we don't know how to do it on a mobile phone. We have learned how to do it on the internet, let's say on a PC or on a laptop. But mobile devices have their own unique, interface, man-machine interface in some fashion. So mobile advertising is the fastest growing medium worldwide, especially in emerging markets. And the third major area is user-generated advertising. User-generated content, but also user-generated advertising. And a lead company like Frito-Lay has used this as an advantage by having a competition to create advertisements for Frito-Lay products, and if selected, the advertisement is shown on the American football, a Super Bowl game, which is the ultimate thing. It's very much like the World Cup on the other side. So it's basically crowdsourcing, as it is called. Most of the advertising, promotion, as well as communication may become more crowdsourcing. Marketer is not in charge anymore, but the user is the consumer is getting more in charge. That's very key. The impact of digital age on promotion is much more dramatic than on product even. We talked about some of those impacts, like user generating more advertising content, user generating more innovative ideas about sales promotions. But the real change, I think, with the digital age is where people extend themselves in the digital world using products and services. We have already seen products placements into movies, remember those? There will be at strategic locations. Television shows, we have seen that thing. Some of the good television stars would sort of have an infomercial type, commercials. I mean, that's nothing. Now think about now where millions of people, all well educated actually, coming home and immediately logging in to either a Second Life community or logging in to Farmville or creating own digital avatars, their own replicas, as if they are independent entities than themselves. And now all of the product placement opportunities I have, and actually any consumer can become an evangelist essentially. Mind-boggling. There is a classic article in marketing called Extending the Self the concept of a self in sociology was discovered as not limited to themselves, which is ego, for example, as we had in the Freudian psychology. But self is defined by, through my possessions, who I am, who are my neighbors, who are my family members, which community I belong to. Classic paper was written by Russell Belk in Consumer Behavior. Now he has written a paper, we have written paper about extending the self into the digital age or into the digital world. And the scenarios are mind-boggling, and just when we thought the scenarios are more sort of a sci-fi movies, but they are actually real. Just as Star Wars movies created the whole following where people dress up into the costumes, or all of the comic strips, we have all the heroes and they dress up into heroes for parties, like costume parties or Star Wars parties or get-togethers. This is nothing, because that's very expensive, time-consuming. I can do it maybe once a year, maybe once a month at best, but here in this world, I can do it continuously. And the people doing it would be millions and billions, not just hundreds and thousands. Mind-boggling change. This technology is also now able to blur the boundaries between advertising dollars, promotion dollars, and word-of-mouth influence dollars. I don't need to create separate budgets for them. In fact, in the digital world, especially with social media, I may not be able to sort out. It's all together. So advertising, promotion, word-of-mouth all blur their boundaries in the way promotion as a function within a company will be managed. And the last one is my own favorite, my invention, my discovery. I like this very much. Remember, in communication we had Marshall McLuhan, giant in his thinking, and he coined a phrase that the medium becomes the message. He was very right for the industrial age, but I think he will be proven wrong. In the digital age, the messenger becomes the medium. Whoever creates a information, knowledge, commercials, advertising, product information, whatever it is, I don't care. I can now have my own channel, a medium, so I can have now millions and millions of channels not regulated by Federal Communications Commission or by Federal Trade Commission, any of the regulatory bodies. It is outside of the regulatory parameter of all of the mass media by and large. As we have seen with YouTube, all of us can create our own YouTube channel, and we may have a loyal following of our own. Of course, many celebrities definitely have them. Some political leaders are now engaging themselves in having their own YouTube channel, where on that channel, everything about that individual and what he or she is communicating is shown in a short videos or however YouTube manages. So in the world of YouTube, there is no some such thing as a given medium. It is the messenger who becomes the medium. As we have seen with the Twitter the same way, much more on the text messaging side, YouTube on the video side. I think this is a massive change. Let's go to the third P in marketing, called place or distribution. Again, we have a fundamental disruption in the thinking. If you are in retailing where place begins, a bazaar, a shopping center, the notion was that what matters most in success in retailing is location, location, location. We have heard that in all real estate. That theory may not be true anymore in the digital world. Location can be anywhere. The internet is such a rich medium because it can combine voice, video, and data, voice, text, and video, for example, more than any other technology can ever do. It can converge as the word goes. but it also has a reach, a global reach. Anybody sitting some other place can easily be aware of what I am communicating or what I want to offer. Fascinating change. Remember, there was a great, I guess a scholar, I don't remember the discipline, at Columbia University, I think it was psychologist, who said 6 degrees of freedom. 6 degrees, 6 times connections, you can always meet somebody in the world out of billions of people. Today it is down to 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation. I'm sorry, it was 6 degrees of separation. Now it is only 1 degree of separation, maybe 2. And I've heard a lot of anecdotal stories that somebody was tracing in the remote part of Russia, let's say in Siberia, is able to reach that person by having only 1 or 2 iterations. So 6 degrees of separation is now down to 2 degrees of separation essentially. So I can buy products from any retailer anywhere in the world. Not only can I have master hyper e-commerce retailers like Amazon, Alibaba, Flipkart, etc., but I can have a little mom and pop store somewhere in a small town in Australia who probably has a unique product, such as, for example, let's say one of those antiques from India, and sitting in Atlanta, I can buy that. All frictionless. Isn't that interesting? And I have done that using eBay, for example. So eBay becomes a great platform which liberates the whole location-based theories. We also have demand-driven real-time sourcing. For the first time, the whole notion of manufacturing products, warehousing them, wholesaling them, retailing them changes completely, upside down. Today, everything is demand. Once I have the demand, then I place the order from the supplier, and I don't even have to have an inventory or a warehouse as a buffering mechanism. So it's a demand-driven sourcing becomes very true. As I mentioned the example of Uber, and there are counterparts. My colleagues have told me there are more newer examples I should talk about. But it's fascinating that I have a demand for a taxi or a car, a limousine, no matter where I am, and I can simply order that one, and it comes within minutes, depending on the traffic and the demand, etc., which is fascinating. And I have an ex-student of mine who has created voice of the customer, goes to a typical hotel, a hospitality industry, let's say a Sheraton or a Hilton, asks for consumer feedback voice. Used to be, remember, you filled out a form when you were checking out, and they'll say, will you please fill out a form, or in the restaurant after the meal about your customer experience. This one actually is a voice. It's a voice of the customer. But more interesting is that as soon as he gets that voice, which is then sent out, he has a computer software, he shops around worldwide who will convert that into text. Isn't that fascinating? And there are people waiting on their PC to capture his order. The price points are commoditized. It's job. So what you call each piecemeal job. He gets all that, and then usually the company, let's say Sheraton, has BlackBerry given to all of the key managers for all the frontline activities. A typical, in fact, the hotel manager, operations manager, the catering manager, the housekeeping manager, the front lobby, etc. They all get that message real time. Either a customer complaint, a customer praise, and they fix it on real time. I've heard those voices. I've listened to or I've watched the text message also. It's mind-boggling. So today I can have that reach. I can have the sourcing done based upon the demand. So the whole reverse marketing begins to take place. Rather than manufacturing driving marketing, now marketing drives manufacturing. And this is having an enormous impact, for example, in the CIO function in a company, the IT Chief Information Officer, who is more involved in the traditional way of creating what is known as the legacy systems, a typical ERP system like a SAP or a Oracle. But now today, more and more dollars are going in the IT budget to the Chief Marketing Officer. So what happens in the front line in the marketplace begins to drive everything in the supply chain. That's, I think, is a massive change. Next area, of course, again in this location area or a place, is e-commerce on mobile devices. E-commerce is there, but it's going on mobile devices, which I think is the biggest what I would call a typical breakthrough or a change, a discontinuity, a non-linearity. And of course, this is what's happening with companies like Alibaba, Tencent in China, Flipkart, and of course, Amazon. But as I said earlier, advanced countries are really behind because we had to go through PC evolution. Emerging economies basically have bypassed that and have gone into the cell phone evolution, and numbers are much more staggering in the cell phones compared to the PCs. The two industries where I'm watching the impact of location, because they always have been very location-centric, are education and healthcare. There's a lot of debate going on whether you can provide healthcare by remote ways. The answer is yes. Maybe primary care, you may need the patient and the doctor dialogue in some fashion. But for example, you take an X-ray image, and reading the X-ray image, it can be done by any specialist out no matter where they are. I see a day when, just like we had a company created out of India called Tutor Vista, where in the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, math, high school students need a personal counselor, right? It's an education. While I'm studying my books, I'm having problems, parents are not as helpful. So this gentleman created a company out of India where 2,000 or 3,000 teachers were all in remote India, not in main metro, but in smaller towns, knowing math and science very well, giving online counseling, which would be, let's say, evening time here in America and would be the daytime in India or vice versa. Created a successful venture, sold it to Pearson Education. I see the day where a similar thing, that I'm struggling with something as a patient. I want to get more knowledge as a patient. I want to go beyond WebMD and just search for it on Google. I want a real-time counseling. And it's very possible that I can have thousands of those counselors sitting anywhere in the world giving me advice, including patients themselves. I'm suffering from the same chronic problem as you are, but it is more official, it is a paid service. Think about that one. So today I can have a very strong distributed healthcare delivery. Most of the stuff in healthcare delivery is strictly talking to the patient, examining the patient, making sure prescription is the right, maybe psychological comfort, counseling. This can be all done online. So suddenly, the shortage of doctors, as we have in many advanced countries, goes away because everybody becomes a doctor. And you can certify if you wanted to. Like the teacher in India is a certified teacher. She has qualified degrees. She has probably passed a board exam. I mean, anybody can do it. It's not that difficult. So suddenly the supply function begins to increase rapidly when you have such acute shortage of primary care, let's say in advanced countries like America, United Kingdom, Canada, and maybe continental Europe. So remote diagnosis is here. Similarly, I've been watching the rise of Coursera. It's called a MOOC, massive online open courses. I think we need to take that seriously if you are in the education field. Just as we laughed at the rise of part-time, stud students. We used to always laugh at correspondence schools in my younger days. We began to laugh at companies like University of Phoenix, for-profit organization, which became the largest higher education institution for working people who only had time in the evening, whereas most of the academic institutions would say, you come to my location during the normal hours. Change the paradigm. There was a huge another market that was untapped altogether by colleges and universities. They always thought only student would be a high school graduate who will come to the college, as opposed to adult people who bypassed the education and working, and now they would like to get education, certification, vocational skill set, whatever it is. I would not underestimate, therefore, the power of the MOOCs in transforming, and the innovation may not take place or commercial success may not happen in advanced countries, which is highly regulated in some fashion, but may happen in fact in emerging markets. So that's the key area. The fourth P of marketing is price. Price, again, like promotion, is going through massive transformation. Fundamentally, the price arbitrage that usually happens because of the inefficiency of the markets between demand and supply goes away. I can expand the demand into territories and places I never thought was possible, and I can have a supply expanded the same way. The role of the middleman begins to decline, disintermediation takes place, especially in emerging markets where you have, more often than not, 8, 9, 10, and I've seen 11 middlemen from the producer to the consumer. Each one having their margin, each one stocking the product, inventorying the product, financing, etc. This all goes away much faster, which is why online commerce is likely to succeed more in emerging markets because of the lack of efficiency or huge amount of inefficiency between the producer and the consumer. You have seen the stories about totally illiterate fishermen catching their fish daily, bringing their boat, little boat, to a location where there's a market, bazaar, fish market, and knowing the price points, how it varies from one fish market to the other, all within 4 or 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers at best, and they can steer that boat from one bazaar or one fish market to another one, and therefore price arbitrage is just not sustainable in this particular scenario. And the main thing is that prices become real time, and therefore the notion of dynamic pricing. We know dynamic pricing in the stock market, of course. We have seen sort of the early stages of dynamic pricing or yield management in airlines, for example. We see somewhat very primitive in the hospitality, hotel, motel business. But think about dynamic pricing for grocery products. Who said grocery products have to be priced on a weekly basis or a daily basis in a supermarket? With this technology, I can make a price as dynamic as on a real time and maybe as personalized as an individual consumer. Today it's very possible. So the price you pay may not be the same as price I pay. It's interesting. Which has a whole regulatory implications. Is that a price discrimination? And is price discrimination socially in favor of the privileged people, and socially it is against the underprivileged? Will be the debates we will start once I have a dynamic pricing. Watching the movie Minority Report, which is really talking about the futuristic view of retailing, where as everything is on a glass window, there are no physical products displayed, they're all digital virtual products, but they're customized as I walk. Only products that I'm interested in are showing to me, and somebody else walking sees other products, and based upon my mobile device that I have, which is integrated, linked, synced, whatever it is, I can order the product. I was just told that in Atlanta, they now have a museum for College Hall of Fame, and there's a wall of 53 feet where if I have a device with me, wall has no physical objects at all, and the college that I like, let's say I like Notre Dame, I like Ohio State, I like University of Southern California where I was a professor, the Trojans, for example, then I can watch on the wall everything: video, text, awards, athletes' names, their pictures on the wall, highly personalized to me. Think about, which is a very different Hall of Fame than the traditional Hall of Fame, where you need, like a museum, a large space, a decoration, a curation, etc. This is all digital curation. Mind-boggling. So pricing is likely to be dynamic, real time, like the stock market. And you might even have my device made smart to negotiate the price on your store. Remember, we always have negotiated prices in business marketing, B2B marketing. In all professional services, we have a negotiated prices. As a consultant, as a speech maker, as a keynote speaker, I have to negotiate price for each engagement, essentially, within the price bounds. And so price haggling negotiation is very common. It now happens in the consumer markets on a real time, where my device simply says, I know where the prices are. Here's the price I'm willing to pay. Are you willing to sell me? As we are doing with automobile pricing today, before I go to buy a car, now I'm tempted to do a Google search of some sort, find out competitive prices for a brand that I want to buy between dealers and competing product lines. I'm thinking about whether it's this model or that model or this make or that make. With that information, I am now in a much stronger position to negotiate price, because there's an asymmetry of information in the reverse way. As a consumer, I have more knowledge of the price points than the sales guy at that automobile dealer. Fascinating. So airlines, online trading, etc. are typical examples. Next one is subscription-based pricing, which I think is another paradigm shift in the pricing model. In the industrial age, we shifted pricing from buying it like a home, buying like a machine. You had to have all the cash to pay. We invented leasing. We invented leasing to a level where, for example, in the late 70s, early 80s, most airlines had no money to buy aircraft. So you came out with a General Electric capital, GE capital, actually buying the airplanes from the Boeings of the world and the Airbus of the world, and selling it on a lease or supplying on a lease, as they've done with military aircraft. Think about that one, a nation having nothing but leased aircraft, and therefore GE Capital can recall them anytime they want. Fascinating. And counterpart to GE Capital, of course, there is a Irish company which is, of course, as big as GE Capital in leasing industrial equipment, including aircraft. This model now changes. It is more what is known as a subscription-based pricing. Anything that I don't have capital dollars, CapEx as it is called, I begin to now rent it, but rent with an option to buy. So the leasing becomes very key, and in software, this is called software as a service. So you pay utility monthly fees for cloud computing services, for example. So now, next area of pricing, equally important to analyze, is bundling and unbundling of offerings. So far we know bundling, unbundling, but in a more primitive way. Can we have in the digital age bundling and unbundling of cable TV, a wireless service, and an internet on a real-time basis? We have rudiments of that, because on cable TV you have the pay-per-view for a major, let's say, wrestling match or a boxing match or a major entertainment event, for example, etc. You can have that thing. But in the bundling, unbundling, we have not as yet come to understand how to do dynamic pricing, where I can bundle it, but I can unbundle it. It is still very manual so far. And the last area on pricing is globalization of pricing. The typical country-by-country boundaries on prices, which are set either by government, import-export rules, regulations, begins to collapse now. The walls created by tariffs, by regulation, begin to go away more and more in the age of the internet, by and large. So this is where an Alibaba can have something in New York as a store. They can have e-commerce for American consumers competing with Amazon, and they have a supply function from China, and the price points are basically direct price points. There's only one intermediary in the middle, and creating a price disintermediation in a significant way. We have seen this for commodity prices like the oil, the wheat, the iron, the metals in general. We see this in currency hedging, but I think this will become norm pretty much about globalized pricing for most products and services. Final thought. I know this lecture is a little longer, but here is the final thought. In addition to the 4 Ps of marketing, digital technology will also impact on the market research, the way we do market research, which social media is clearly transforming market research. Rather than collecting numerical data and analyzing it, now we have this big data generated by consumers, mostly text and voice, totally qualitative in nature, doing research, getting the feedback, etc., etc. Customer support, another part of marketing organization, and customer feedback. All these 3 things are going to radically change with the digital age. So we have now social media analytics. We have crowdsourcing, as I mentioned before, in terms of gathering information, in terms of getting advice, in terms of getting ideas on a massive scale. Traditional marketing as we know it today, which is location bound and time bound, will become peripheral, and digital marketing, which is peripheral today, will become the core. Anything we give up as a daily necessity or activity always comes back as a hobby. So traditional marketing will come back, but more like nostalgia, more like heritage, more like how we used to do kind of a notion. And we have seen this thing in every activity, hunting and fishing, hunters and gatherer days before we had the typical farming economy, baking bread. Now we don't bake breads, but has come back as a hobby, gardening, cooking, etc., etc. We have all the examples pretty much, both consumer and the industrial. Therefore, location-centric and time-centric marketing will evolve as more and more niche marketing, specialty marketing, whereas mainstream is all about digital marketing. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Thank you very much.